Hello, and welcome to episode 183 on the Everyday Joy podcast. I'm your host, Joy Ravella. Now, on the day of me recording this, I have been a little snappy. I've been a bit of a grump monster, if I'm honest. I grumped at basically my mum on the phone. I grumped at, just created a new word, grumped. I have grumped at a number of people. I've walked into rooms and I've just had obviously an expression on my face and people are just like noticing that I'm not okay and I don't like this version of myself. So I thought, you know what? I actually need to listen to this episode for myself. And then I need to edit it as a content creator. So I just sat down in studio and I listened to it. And it was so good for my soul. I feel like there's been a shift. And then I listened to it again and just tidied it up a little bit, you know, putting on my content hat. But sometimes I got to hear these episodes myself. Sometimes I need a little bit of everyday joy because I have been a bit of a everyday grump really for the last couple of days. And if that is you, if you're feeling a little grumpy, you don't really like the naggy version of yourself or the grumpy or the short or bitter person that you've become recently, today's episode is for you. Let's get into it.
If you are sensible, you will control your temper. When somebody wrongs you, it is a great virtue to ignore it. This is found in Proverbs chapter 19, verse 11 of the GNT.
I've got Gig wrapping up the week here with me. I feel like we've touched on this verse a couple of times before.
It's funny because there were some verses that I wanted to bring forward this week and I toyed and I went, Lord, this one's very similar to the other day. And I just kept coming back to going, no, you need to work on this one because the community needs to hear it. Yeah. And there's, something in the air that we need to learn and grow with.
I think so. Often it happens, the verses I select for just want to know how it works behind the scenes. The verses that I put out are randomly generated. There's a bank that we use, about 150 verses, I think, and I send out about 5 or 6 to all the podcast contributors randomly. I try not to get too many from the same book in the Bible, but that's the only thing that I control really. Yep. And everything else I just really let God lead. Yes. And often there's a theme that arises.
There has been, yes.
So I think this week, this is really for you if you are struggling with your temper, if you're struggling with your anger, if you're struggling period. Yep. But especially in the space of like letting go and anger and surrendering, I think this is a great one to wrap up the week with.
Yes.
My first impression of this one, if I'm honest, it's just the last bit to ignore it.
Just ignore it, Joy. Just ignore it.
There's a part of me that goes, but no, that's not right. We have to address things. We have to talk about things. We've got to do stuff. That's my first impression.
Yep.
And then when I read it again, I think about it and I say to myself, actually, you got to pick your battles. That's been one of my biggest lessons this past year. It has been pick your battles, Joy, as well as choose which hill you want to die on, because you've got a limited amount of strength and energy and resource. Are you going to go into battle for this little thing, or are you just going to pray about it and let it go? Because often what happens with the little things, they resolve anyway.
Yes.
Over time.
Or they turn into big things and in the end you go, what was I angry about? I can't remember.
Yeah.
And that's a really good tool, choosing your battles before you have kids. I learned that probably a little bit later.
What do you mean, choosing your battles?
Well, with your kids, they are jerks. Joy. Once they become toddlers, they're not angelic anymore and they do stupid things. Choose what you want to, you can be quietly disciplining and you don't always have to get grumpy and angry and, you shouldn't have done this and let's do this. What should you be doing? Choose your battles.
Mm.
Yeah. So otherwise you're down their throats all day.
Yeah.
Choose your battles. Don't be a grumpy mum. Choose your battles.
Yeah. No,
just love them.
Don't want to be a grumpy mum. I say that. No mum does.
No.
Yeah. So what are your first impressions of this one, Gig?
As soon as someone says, just ignore it. Just, my first thought is, when someone tells you to calm down, it's like...
Just calm down.
Just calm down. It's like, especially when your spouse, just calm down. excuse me? It's like, it's trying to bath a cat. You know, you get nothing out of bathing a cat. It's just angry and get me out of this water. It just fuels the fire. And, so this is a really tricky one for me. And there's other translations that says to be wise, which is something us humans are very poor at sometimes, especially when we're angry. But it's a very hard action to do, but it's great advice, really good advice if we can take it on board.
Yeah, because I think for me, what this tells me about God is that he acknowledges values that are around being sensible, choosing your battles, and knowing when to ignore something.
Yeah.
And I think that's so contrary to the world that we live in, which is all about if someone offends you, it's wrong to not do something about it.
You get on social media and you go back at them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's the virtue. But God's saying it's a virtue when someone wrongs you. It's a virtue to ignore it. I think, though, we do have to look at this verse in the context of all the other scriptures and the way Jesus lived his life as well. I think it's dangerous just to look at this and be like, it's a great virtue to ignore every time someone does something bad to me, because that's not what this verse says.
Yeah.
If you look at it in line with all the other verses, and you look at the life of Jesus, he was wronged so many times. But he chose to forgive. Yeah. He chose to work with that person. He chose to move on. Yep. There were also times when he created a whip and drove people out of a temple because they were misusing it. Yeah. So I think there's absolutely times when you don't ignore things, but I think on the whole, going out and whipping things for every little thing, that's not the kind of life that God has for us. We've got things in our lives that we are responsible to look after, like our children, our own mental health, our jobs, these sorts of things. You can't be looking after them if you're going out to battle for everyone who's offended you.
Exactly.
And I think that's what I think this verse tells me about who God is. He's saying, don't go fight every single battle. You can't. It's a great virtue to ignore it.
And for me, Joy, it really says that it cements in me that God does not want other people taking up space in our heads and taking away from him and just taking our time. And when you're holding, when you're holding that stuff, doesn't it eat you away? You lose sleep. You don't eat. It's just, and God knows that. You just don't hold it. Stand strong. Be wise. Don't let that anger take up that space in your brain. Forgive that person and move on if you can. And if you can't, just keep asking God, I can't do this. I need you.
Yeah.
And I've been there, done that. And it's been years and years. I need you, God. I need you, God. I need you, God. And he will turn up every time.
Yeah. And you can keep asking as many times as you need to ask.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How has this verse come alive in your world, Gig?
As we spoke earlier, no one makes you angry, you allow yourself to be angry. But I personally, as I said before, it comes alive within me because I lose it so badly with myself. Look, once I realise what I'm doing, I've got this little trick, Joy, where it's very American and it's a little song and it's called Holy Spirit Activate. I don't know whether ever heard it.
No. I think I've heard you hum it before, though.
It's Holy Spirit Activate. Holy Spirit Activate. And you dance and Holy Spirit Activate. And it's I've seen on so many Instagram posts, wonderful gospel black women, dancing, Holy Spirit Activate. And it's just like, I'm so angry, let's change it. And I found that to be just a little twig that I do, Holy Spirit Activate, Holy Spirit, because it's fun. And I dance with it. I've got to dance with it because I've seen all the clips of these women doing it and I have no idea where it comes from. So if you know, let me know. And it's just get involved, the resources God's got around you all the time. Holy Spirit lives within me. I'm going to go for it each time and reach in and take advantage.
Well, that comes to the end of today's episode on the Everyday Joy podcast. Such a beautiful one to focus on. And what I love the most about this particular verse is that it talks a lot about this idea that we have a lot of control over our own emotions, and we can't necessarily control what people say and do around us, but we can sort of break that circuit. And sometimes that's what it takes, a silly song and dance, the Holy Spirit activate jingle that I think is going to get stuck in my brain for a long time. Sometimes you just got to move your body. Sometimes you've just got to say something a little ridiculous. Sometimes you've just got to go into a bathroom, close the door, look at yourself in the mirror, and do a jive while you sing Holy Spirit activate. It sounds ridiculous. Sometimes you've just got to short circuit that grumpy or bitter or angry pattern that's been on repeat in your brain. And you can bet your bottom dollar that at the end of recording this, I'm going to go straight to the bathroom and try it out myself. Hey, I hope you enjoyed today's episode on the podcast. It will be extended over on the Facebook page, so go check it out. If you would like to send through an email, if there's anything that's really jumped out at you, the email address is also in the link below. Love hearing from people who have messaged through. Thank you so much. Look forward to catching up again tomorrow.